Hi everyone, Helen Blunden here. Hope you're happy, healthy and well. It's time for a new book review today where I share some life lessons out of books that I have been reading. Over the weekend, it was quite a warm weekend and I decided to just spend it inside reading. And I read this book by Banana Yoshimoto called Goodbye Tsugumi. This is the second book I've read of hers, and the first book I read was Kitchen, which you may have heard about. Unfortunately, I don't think I did a review on this channel. Goodbye Tsugumi was written in 1989, and what I'll talk about here today is what the book is about, and then I'll glean some life lessons. For a book that is about 186 pages, if you like stories that kind of seem plotless, are more around themes, deep meanings, then I think this book would be for you. I actually quite liked it, although I read some reviews online where people preferred her other books as opposed to this one. I would say I'm in, at the moment, a point where I am reading Japanese authors and I love the way they write. They don't dilly-dally with a lot of adjectives and a lot of descriptions, but I guess their writing actually puts us into a different world where you have to look at what is happening in that story to try and glean and understand the characters and what they might be facing and their emotional situations. In some way, I actually quite enjoy reading Japanese authors, Japanese fiction, if they're written in this format of more like dreamlike memories, reminiscences that somehow make you think about your own life. Now, I found this book at a secondhand bookstore. I bought it for $3 and I was quite lucky when I walked into this bookstore. I had a chat with the owner who had pointed me out to a stack of books that had just come in from a family who was wrapping up their father's estate and returning these books that he had got from this seller many years back. He had a ton of Japanese authors there and I bought some of them too. They're really good discounted prices. I thought as over time I will share what these are with you. Is a slow read in the sense that you need to focus on the writing because it gets you into this other world. It is a coming of age story and it is about three cousins. These cousins live at a seaside village, not a very busy village, and this village has all these inns and it happens during summer. Maria, who is the protagonist of this story, has a mother and father who love each other dearly, but parents fell in love. It's an affair, okay? And so she was born out of an affair. And her father finally leaves his first wife and decides to move the family to Tokyo. Maria starts to think how this is her last days in this idyllic town with her cousins, and she feels sad to say goodbye. She moves with her family to Tokyo and she misses being near the sea. She misses the life of hearing the waves, of having the water by her skin. The way it's written really evokes all these smells and situations that you could get from really beautiful writing. But she gets invited to go back to the inn for one last summer because even her cousins are going to be moving away, and also there is word that there is a big hotel complex being built, which will basically mean that the livelihoods of the people who have inns will change forever. This story, it's about Maria coming back to her cousins and spending one last summer at the Yamamoto Inn and what they get up. Her cousin Tsugumi is really interesting. Imagine her as someone who is a lifelong invalid. She has a sickness that we don't know what it's about, but we know that she's very frail, she's very thin, she's very sick. She's also a character I didn't like. The way she was written she was horrible. She didn't realize that her family around her, everyone bent over backwards to make sure that she had a good life. And yet she treated them horribly. She spoke to them horribly. I found the character of Tsugumi actually grating on my nerves, in particular how she had this holier than thou attitude. For someone who is very sick and who probably would not see her adult years through, she was actually quite egotistical, very selfish, and everything was all about her, and she didn't see how the others helped her. Maria was a much more sensitive and empathetic person. She had this self-awareness about her. She was quite reflective, and she understood Tsugumi like many others didn't. And so she gave Tsugumi leeway. So the character of Maria was much more in line to someone who I could resonate with, who I could empathize with, because she seemed to understand the situation. Maria had this knack of being able to read the environment, read the situation around her, and read people's actions and behaviors towards Tsugumi. In the book also, we get introduced to the male character, who has a love interest for Tsugumi as well, and two wonderful little dogs. But I won't say what happens to because it'll be a spoiler. This book was actually quite surprising for me, because where you expect something to happen to Tsugumi, something else happens. So it takes you on a completely different tangent, but I won't say any more. The very first theme was the need of goodbyes. Regardless of where we are in our lives, we're always going to be saying goodbye to someone somewhere. And this goodbye was that point in understanding that this summer is going to be the last one that you're going to have with your cousins in a place that you feel at home, because every one of us grows up, our situations change, we move on, we move out, our parents take us away from that environment, but we leave with such good memories and with good experiences and good stories. And it's that point where we realize that we are growing up, we are moving on. This sense of goodbye made me think of my own experiences growing up. I came from a Greek background, so I had my cousins all around me. We played together, we did everything together. As you can understand, our parents always congregated together. Even during summer holidays, we would take everything but the kitchen sink. But it was around that age of about 11 years old when we would be moving, and you'd understand that things are changing. We would be going to high school, we would be going to different schools. And at this time, the parents would pick up and move on elsewhere, would move to different suburbs, and would basically start their own lives. And this book reminded me of that growing up, realizing that, you know, we can't stay kids forever. We can't hang out with our cousins forever. There's going to be some point where we move on, and that's all about growing up. But when we think about our childhood and those experiences, we think about them quite fondly, reminiscing of our last summer of childhood, knowing that life will move on, that life will be different from now on. The second life theme I would say was how the importance of being able to understand behaviors and reactions and emotions and reading the environment of people around you. And I picked this up from Tsugumi, who was basically clueless. She was an invalid, as I mentioned, and yet she was very egotistical and very, very, very self-centered. And yet it was only Maria who actually saw through it. Sometimes I think the one thing that I got out of this was people in their own way react differently to people. Just because you might not be that way inclined, just because you don't act like she did, it might mean that that's her reaction and how she comes to terms with her sickness. So we don't know what other people's stories are. We don't know why they're acting in certain ways. We make assumptions, but unless we've walked in their shoes, we really, really don't know. The third life lesson I got from this book, the importance and understanding of having people in our lives through those shared experiences. The descriptions of the inns being next to the sea and people coming and going and congregating and drinking and eating and also living in these inns, but also having this coming together but having to go on and start their own lives, made me think of the importance of how our life sometimes is actually quite transitory. We have to come to terms with saying goodbye and not to expect that it's always going to be the same. We're not going to have those same people in our lives. People are just going to come and go, and that we have to get comfortable with saying goodbye. It is a great read. I mentioned it's a slow read, but not in the sense that it's a difficult read. It's a read whereby you need to read it in order to start to feel the feelings that the writer was trying to get us to feel. Those feelings of reminiscing, those feelings of memory, those feelings of childhood. Banana Yoshimoto wrote this excellent book, and it's one that I would highly recommend. She's an interesting character, the author. She was born in 1964. She has written so many books. I was interested to read that she spends only half an hour of her day writing her stories. She's won many prizes in Japan. The translation is beautiful. I actually quite think that translated texts from Japanese are very different. They don't seem to be very wordy as they are, and yet all the words are exact and correct and where they should be. Not many adjectives, not many descriptions, which I like. A good storyline that evokes the place and the feelings of the characters. There you have it. That is Goodbye Tsugumi by Banana Yoshimoto. Thank you for listening, and thank you for watching. Bye for now.